This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, here we go. Breaking news on CNN. I'm Brooke Baldwin. I don't think I've ever seen these words before, but this is the first time for everything. A blimp is on the loose. We are told it is flying somewhere in the skies over Pennsylvania. There are F-16 jets that have now been scrambled. Boy, oh boy, do I have some questions on this one. So let's bring in our Pentagon correspondent, Barbara Starr. Also with me, our CNN aviation analyst, Mary Schiavo. And Barbara, first of all, we're looking at pictures of what I presume to be an example of what said blimp would look like. Can you tell me what the heck happened, please?
Well, what we know at this hour is NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, has now confirmed that this blimp, it's called J-Lens, came loose from its mooring, from its tether rope at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, a military facility just north of Washington, D.C., this morning. It was on a tether. This is a system they're testing out there. It's full of radar equipment to try and test its ability to detect unidentified objects, unidentified aircraft, cruise missiles, that sort of thing. But it came loose. So now this blimp filled with helium is flying north. It is now over Pennsylvania, we are told. 2 F-16s in the air. They were scrambled out of their air station near Atlantic City, New Jersey. The military not saying yet whether those F-16s are armed, because right now the U.S. government's trying to figure out what to do about this. I talked to an official tracking this whole situation just a few minutes ago, and he said, we are trying to figure it out. So the U.S. military now working with the FAA. Obviously, a lot of concern to make sure airspace safety is maintained. This is flying uncontrolled at about 16,000 feet right now over Pennsylvania. They have to make sure there's no unexpected air traffic that would get in its way, that would get in the way of this path of this blimp. So air safety, a very serious concern at this hour. Also trying to figure out the obvious question, what do they do to bring it down, to get it on the ground in a safe manner? No answer to that question at this moment. There is I'm told, a fairly energetic effort between a number of federal agencies looking at all of the options. They don't think at this point it's about to lose helium anytime soon and drift to the ground. Are they going to have to take military action and shoot it down? This is the same dilemma, and I know Mary can talk about this in more detail, that you often have when there have been, small private planes that lose their oxygen system, the pilot's unconscious, and these planes pose a potential threat on the ground. But this is a massive, much larger than a small airplane. So they have to figure out a way to get it down, get it on the ground safely, not injure anybody on the ground, and not cause any damage on the ground. So shooting it down could theoretically be an option, but you would have to have a pretty good engineering analysis to know where that wreckage might go, what the winds are, how it might drift, and where it would impact on the ground. They're going to want to make sure, we know the military always wants to make sure when unidentified things are out there that they stay away. They keep them away from populated areas. How they do that right now, no answers.
Okay, so F-16 scrambled. We don't know if they're armed or not. To your point, Barbara, Mary, run through possible options? Maybe option A, shooting it down. But to Barbara's point, you got to be very careful because this is a large blimp where this thing would potentially land. What else?
Well, and in shooting it down, things are very different from the days of the Hindenburg because the air, the helium inside the blimp is compartmentalized, and it's far less flammable and explosive than in the days of the Hindenburg days. So they could, if they had to shoot it down, one shot would not just cause it to basically pop like a balloon because it is compartmentalized, and so they could bring it down gradually, not losing the payload on board, and also not causing a sort of a catastrophic event where it would come down. The problem is that it's not like an aircraft, in that an aircraft, if the pilot is incapacitated, the aircraft will maintain the heading and the attitude of the plane that was last input into the aircraft. In other words, it will glide, and we know where it's going to glide. With a blimp, we don't have that because it's subject to air currents, and that's why a plane or a helicopter could not try to get one of the tether lines. Remember, it does have lines from the front of the blimp and the back of the blimp and then hanging down from the blimp, but you can't get near it because it doesn't have a trajectory like an aircraft that's disabled. So my guess is they will try to take it down gradually with one shot into different compartments, and it will not end up like the Hindenburg.
Okay, maybe they have a chase van on the ground watching because of the wind speeds. Ladies, don't go too far. We're going to keep our close eye on this blimp on the loose. Mary Schiavo and Barbara Starr, thank you both so much. Got to get to South Carolina. Back to our breaking news here. We are tracking this U.S. military blimp that has been on the loose for quite a little while today. We are told it broke loose from its moorings sometime and somewhere over Maryland, flying now somewhere over Pennsylvania. F-16 jets have been scrambled. So I have with me Major General Spider Marks. So let me just begin with General, how the heck did they bring this thing down? But we first have Tom Sater, who is standing by in the CNN Weather Center. So, Tom Sater, let me go to you. Okay. How big is this blimp?
I believe it's 230 feet. This is big. And it's large and white, and it's only half the distance of where flight level is for planes. So if you see a plane, obviously 35,000 feet, this is only 16. There are going to be some areas that we're going to get all kinds of video because even though there is rain, and I think that rain is going to keep it at 30 or 16, maybe 18,000 feet from rising too high, but we're going to probably get some video. But let's talk about what we know and what we do not know, Brooke, because this is important. When you talk about the National Weather Service, several times a day, several offices release weather balloons. It's made of latex, and they fill it with hydrogen because they can fill it with helium, but that's more expensive. We know this blimp is filled with helium, all right? We do not know if it's a heavy-duty latex, and that's important because when weather balloons rise from National Weather Service, they can reach heights up to the tropopause, which is 60,000 feet. The pressure drops, so the balloon expands until it pops. That's why the material is important. If they let this thing rise, how much pressure can it stand? At what height and elevation would it pop? And they'd let it fall. Here's the other thing. We don't know how heavy the equipment is on this blimp. Obviously, it's experimental and it's military. They know and they're tracking it. But right now, Aberdeen, northeast areas of Maryland, you can see the rain in the region. But what's more importantly are the winds. So let's look at the winds at the height level of this blimp, meaning 16 to 18,000 feet here, all right? This is not 60,000 where those weather balloons go. Across northeast Maryland into Pennsylvania. Where in Pennsylvania, we're not sure. But most likely it'll enter extreme northern New Jersey and then possibly extreme southeastern New York State. Maybe make its way into parts of New England and Connecticut, Massachusetts. But if you follow the winds, they go across the northeast and then they get in the Canadian Maritimes. This is where they may decide if they want to shoot the system down and let it fall. It could get into a safe zone. But think about this, 16,000 feet. All of the airports across this region are going to be high alert. This is going to give fits to air traffic controllers at 16,000 feet across Teterboro, across LaGuardia, JFK, up toward Logan. So it's going to be interesting to find out exactly where this is. But again, we're not sure what this material is, and that means a lot if they just decide to let it go to several thousand feet up in the air.
My goodness, I hope this doesn't affect people flying out anywhere in the Northeast area. What a mess. Spider Marks, Major General Spider Marks, I've got you now, so let me try that again. If we're talking about potentially shooting this thing down, how? From the F-16s?
Well, frankly, the short answer is sure you could, but the issue is these JLENs have a kind of a self-correcting and self-sealing system. They were designed, we first put these things in place when we were in Baghdad so that we could tether them to the ground and have a 24/7 persistent stare and then hang from the bottom of these things various sensors that would give us a good sense of the signals profile on the ground, or we could take some great imagery, some good pictures, etc. So they were a really great intelligence collector, and that's what they're used for here as well. So the key thing is, if you want to shoot this thing down, you want to try to also primarily try to recover the intelligence collection that's on the bottom, which has a lot of, in this case, because it was used here in the United States, a lot of that is traffic data, radar data, and it's important that we capture that data. So it's got a pod, and you're going to want to try to try to secure that thing. Now, bear in mind also that the intelligence and everything that was processed through that has now been downloaded into the cloud, so it's recoverable. So the point is, you might be able to write this thing off, but you've got a pretty powerful sensor capability that you might want to try to preserve. So really, do you want to try to shoot it down, or do you want to try to recover it and tether it again?
Okay, I'm listening to all these possibilities. General Spider Marks, don't go too far. I have so many more questions for you, as I know we're tracking this military blimp, 243 feet in length. This is huge, somewhere over Pennsylvania. Meantime, though, I got to switch gears and go to some more breaking news from Capitol Hill. I have Jeff Zeleny. And we're back, and again, I cannot believe I'm saying this, but Blimp still on the loose here, and we are tracking it. This Blimp is a U.S. military blimp. It has sensitive material, U.S. military sensitive radar equipment, etc. So that's all in this blimp. It's about the size of 2 football fields in length. It flung up from its moorings right around lunchtime, as I was told from a county official in Maryland, around noon, and it has now been spotted. As you can see, someone sent in their video here, so it is somewhere above Pennsylvania, but because this thing, as I was talking to someone from NORAD who knows all about it, said it has this 10,000-foot cable. It's never actually ever supposed to be untethered and flying as it has been, but the cable has been dragging along as this thing has been coming down in altitude, and as a result of that, 20,000 people are without power in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. So that is an issue. Another issue here as well is the FAA and NORAD are working to keep planes out of the path of this runaway blimp. So let's go to our Pentagon correspondent, Barbara Starr, first, and then we'll talk to you, David Susi, our aviation analyst. Barbara Starr, what is the latest you have on this thing?
Well, what we are told, Brooke, is it is now very low to the ground. Those cables are dragging. It may be the people in this area, Columbia County. Yeah, Columbia County in northeast Pennsylvania, that will in fact have the first word, because it'll be coming down in their area by all accounts. I think the thing that people are going to want to realize here, this is unpowered flight. This is basically drifting along with no control of the flight path, no control of where it goes. It drifts essentially with the wind and weather patterns. Since it broke loose shortly thereafter, it's been tracked by F-16 scrambled out of their air station near Atlantic City. At this hour, what we know is the U.S. military now working, of course, very closely with Pennsylvania National Guard, local police, state police. The governor issuing a statement a short time ago saying everybody is working together to make sure when it comes down on the ground, the damage that is caused, possibly the power lines, what the people on the ground may need that are affected by this, all of that now being coordinated between federal, state, and local government officials. For NORAD, for the military, one of the big issues right now, first and foremost, public safety. They want people to stay away from wherever they see this thing, stay away from the cables. Their sheer weight and the fact that they are dragging and that nobody can predict where this thing is going can be very dangerous to public safety, along with the power outages. But also they're looking at trying to get some National Guard, some police out there, so when it finally does come down, they can immediately secure the site. It is classified technology. They want to secure the site and scoop up all of whatever comes down. Brooke?
Okay. David Susi. Thank you, Barbara. David Susi, CNN aviation analyst here, talking about this blimp. You know, something interesting that I think is noteworthy that the spokesperson for NORAD told me a second ago, as we've all been saying, all right, F-16 fighter jets have been scrambled. Is there a possibility of shooting this thing down? And he said, hang on a second. You know, we actually do have the technology, the capability to remotely deflate this. So do you think that that would be their best bet?
What they're doing right now, I would imagine, is tracking it to see which way the wind's blowing it. As Barbara said, there's no way to control where this thing goes. It's simply up to the wind and the altitude that it's flying to tell it where it's going to end up. But this is not a small piece of equipment. So to remotely deflate it, I'm not familiar with what he's talking about with remotely deflating, because technically with this particular blimp, it's controlled through a cable. So the actual control mechanisms go through that cable. If that cable's been severed, I'm not aware of any wireless technology that would allow it to be remotely deflated, unless they just simply pierced it with a missile or some kind of bullets from the F-16s. That's the only way I would know to deflate it. But there's danger in that too, because this is not small. It's not like a small floating piece of balloon. This is a very, very heavy piece of equipment. And when it hits the ground, and it will do so suddenly, as soon as it doesn't have enough helium inside to maintain its altitude, it will go suddenly down. And when it does, we have to be very cautious about where it goes and keep people away. As Barbara said, safety is the biggest issue right now.
I know it's flying low. This is what we're hearing from folks who've actually seen this with their own eyes. But we also, that said, know that the FAA and NORAD are apparently working to make sure planes, don't cross its path. I don't know how they even know what its path would be, but your response to that, what do you think they're doing?
Well, there is visual flight rules. I'm hoping that the weather is still good there. If the weather gets bad, there's going to be a problem, because there'll be airplanes flying without the benefit of being able to see what's in front of them. So in that case, the FAA is probably acting to separate and give it a clear airspace to make sure that no one's flying in that airspace at all. But it is something that people want to see. So we've had this happen a couple of times, once in Hawaii with a large balloon that was released there and a blimp that was lost there. And when that happened, it attracted a lot of the news media, for example, flying helicopters near it, those types of things. These people need to stay away from this device. It's not inherently dangerous in that it's going to, veer off course suddenly. It's going to follow the weather, so it is predictable in that method. But as far as, like I said, when it comes down, it's going to come down hard, so we have to be careful of what's below it and stay alert and aware of what's happening above you at all times.
So in situations like these, generally, we're going through breaking news, and we quickly have pictures of whatever it is we're talking about. In this case, we don't have any news choppers or any eye on this thing live, and I'm wondering, is that because the FAA has said to any kind of TV channel, get out of there, we gotta bring this blimp down safely and get out of the airspace?
Yeah, likely they've done an emergency. Like we did with 9/11, the FAA was shut down the entire airspace. They have the authority to shut down specific airways through NOTAMs to all the pilots. All the pilots should be aware of those. All of the air traffic control centers are. So that area, I would almost assure that area where the blimp is and could possibly go is shut down to all air traffic right now. We just make sure that all the private pilots and those kinds of airplanes are staying away as well.
I am sure, though, once this thing lands, we will have lots of video of that. David Susi, you are the best. Thank you so much. Quick break. We're back on the blimp after this. Welcome back to CNN. I want to welcome our viewers in the United States and all around the world. I'm Brooke Baldwin. We've been reporting on this blimp, about a football field in length, that has become untethered from the Maryland area and is flying somewhere high above the skies of Pennsylvania. 20,000 people are without power as a result of the situation. We know NORAD and the FAA are working together to try to make sure no planes come anywhere near. Likely this is an area no-fly zone as they try to make sure this thing comes down safely. This is a military blimp. There is classified information on board, so we know state, local, federal authorities are all tracking this thing and want to make sure that if and when it does finally come down, that it doesn't injure anyone on the ground, and we want to make sure they get that classified sensitive material as soon as possible. So I have with me still Lieutenant General Mark Hertling, who has a pretty interesting expertise on these J-Lens aerostat blimps, having been in Iraq and Afghanistan. General, you were telling me that you had 17, I believe was the number, 17 of these particular blimps, and 3 of them at one point in time became untethered, and it took you 7 hours to deflate one of them. Can you tell me about that process?
Well, yeah, Brooke, we actually didn't deflate it. We just monitored it, much like what is going on right now, and watched it float. And in that particular case, the forward operating base it came from was near Baghdad, and the doggone thing floated all the way up toward Mosul, about a little over 150 miles away, until it finally came down. And luckily, it came down in our territory, and we could recover it. But we had to monitor it. We were watching it on radar. We had helicopters approaching it, and just like the F-16s are doing now. Make no mistake, those F-16s
are not going to shoot it down. As David Susi said, they are more than likely just clearing the airspace for the rest of the northeastern corridor, so no civilian airplanes crash into this thing. And by the way, these things were not loved by our Army aviators or the Air Force guys as well, because they're very difficult to see at night when they're on their tether, when they're not loose. They're floating around much like a balloon would be, so you don't really know where the wire is holding it to the mooring station. So our Army helicopter pilots would always complain about these things, but the Army infantry guys were really interested in them because it gave really good intelligence about enemy forces on the ground. So it was a mixed bag, but they do break loose, as this one has. The information on board, the actual J-lens, the camera, or whatever it's carrying, in and of itself, it doesn't have any classified information, but it is a device that you certainly don't want to show the capability of it, because the lens and the ability of the optics, it can see, as I said earlier, a great distance. So it's a good piece of kit, and when it does come down, as David Susi says, it will come down like a very heavy balloon wherever it lands. So that in and of itself could be dangerous as well, but when it lands, it's going to land, and it's not something you want to fall out of the sky. It will come down very slowly.
And talking to the spokesperson, I know you were listening, from NORAD, he was saying to me that they do have the ability to remote deflate, which I know is different from the blimps that you dealt with in Iraq. And he was also telling me that it's this 10,000-foot cable that keeps this thing normally tethered to the ground there in Maryland. And it's because of this cable that's dragging over some of these power lines, leaving 20,000 people without power. But when I think of Tether, I think of almost cloth, but clearly this is such a massive sized blimp. What is it, like a metal cable?
It is exactly a metal cable. I mean, these things, first of all, will weigh a couple of 100 pounds. And when you're talking about the force of winds pulling it around, that cable that's tethering it to the mooring station has got to be pretty strong. So I don't know exactly the dimensions of the cable, but it's got to be at least 1 or 2 inches in diameter, and it's an iron cable. It is not a cloth tether. These things are heavy, and they've got to be moored securely. So when you're talking about something breaking away, it could break from the ground station itself. It could break from the nose of the aircraft. And there's only one of the cables attaching to or at least ours. I'm talking about my personal experience. There was one cable attached to the nose of the aircraft, and it would float based on how far, or how much you reeled it in, or how much cable you gave it. So all of those things are factors, and that cable that's holding this thing, which appears to be bigger than the ones we use, probably by twice the size, it's got to be pretty heavy. And again, you're right. It's going to short out electrical cables as it travels over. If it's dragging that cable, it could cause damage because it is a very heavy cable. But the thing that really concerns me more than anything, even though power is out to quite a few people, is the aircraft that might come into its airspace. And that's what the F-16s are doing, is just clearing the air corridors around there, as David Susi said.
Got it. So important to have those F-16 scrambled in a situation like this, and hopefully no one's injured, and this eventually just comes to a standstill on the ground there somewhere, perhaps in Pennsylvania, in a rural area. General Hertling, thank you so much. Speaking of Pennsylvania, I actually have someone on the phone with me, Carm DePippa. Carm, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, so you are there in Pennsylvania. You have had eyes on this blimp. How recently, and how far up was it?
It was, I teach at a school. It was right above the school. It was actually caught on the roof for a while. And then it got loose and flew away. But it did knock the power out here in Columbia County.
So do you have power?
No.
You don't have power. We're looking at this picture. I'm assuming this is the one you sent us. So it was stuck. So this cable here that we've been talking so much about, this cable or this tether, so it somehow, wrapped its way around a piece of a school and was stuck for a while?
Yes. It was stuck for just a little bit at the top of the school. The first picture is actually when it was stuck on the school, and then it flew away. It took off. But yeah, for just a little bit it was stuck there. And the power did go out. it still is out.
Oh my goodness. So were there a bunch of people just standing around on the ground with cell phones looking toward the sky?
Yeah, pretty much the staff, the students were still in the room. It was all dark, and there was a little bit of chaos because of what happened. But yeah, we were out there with our cell phones taking a picture of it.
Were kids still in the school?
Yes, they were, because we didn't know what had happened at that point, what was going on. So we just kind of kept them where they were until we found out what was going on. And then when we realized we weren't going to have power, they told us maybe not till later tonight. So then they were all dismissed as soon as the buses got here.
And let's see, we've talked about altitude, how it's sort of decreasing in altitude. It sounds like it's deflating. Could you tell that with your own eyes?
No, I couldn't tell that. I just know that when it came unattached from the school, it flew off into the distance. You didn't see it, losing altitude at that point.
And how rural is where you're calling me from the Bloomsburg area in Pennsylvania, in case this blimp does decide to come down in your area?
There's a lot of farmlands, but there's a lot of houses. So in our area here, we had a little bit of space if it would have come down, but it didn't come down. But there's neighborhoods and houses around that it could have come down on.
Okay, Carm DePippa, thank you so much. Saw the blimp stuck on a school for a little bit of time there in Pennsylvania. Don't have power. Carm, thank you so much. Hopefully that power will be restored soon enough for you, but thank you so much for calling in. I appreciate it. We're going to take a quick commercial break. You're watching CNN. I'm Brooke Baldwin. Back on this untethered blimp next.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.